Okay, now I come to the second part of this lecture, which is the second lecture on Iraq and Afghanistan, which is 9/11. As you have no doubt heard extensively, Osama bin Laden, through his organization Al Qaeda, sometimes Al Qaeda, had declared war on the United States after the fall of the Soviet Union. Okay, so Soviet Union falls, it's 1989, and in the 90s, the Americans go on being interested in the Middle East, and remember that they have gone to war in the Gulf in 1991, right, which we just looked at. And so bin Laden basically sort of gets a major hate on for the United States during this whole time, mostly because he wants the United States to stop interfering with Islamic countries specifically, but in the Middle East, he wants the United States essentially out of the Middle East, stop playing this game, and so he attacks the United States on September 11th, 2001, using jet airliners as essentially local native bombs, and it was quite the plan. Okay. At the time, if you look back to the news stories from just after 9/11, so if you don't remember it, I'm not going to show pictures of this because enough already. But you'll see the planes flying into the Twin Towers and bringing them down in a matter of seconds and minutes. I think 17 minutes. I can't remember. It did not take long. What then, and the other two planes, one that is flown into the Pentagon and one that crashes because it's overwhelmed by the people on the plane who actually attack the people who are flying the plane, so it can't get to New York because it's in Pennsylvania. Okay. And there's quite a good film of that. I don't know how accurate that is, called United 93 by Paul Greenglass. Pardon me, Greenglass. And which shows the interesting thing about United 93 is that it shows the main FAA controller in the United States who has to decide what to do about the plane, about basically what might be terrorist, quote unquote, terrorist planes that are flying on the job. Like he's there, he's in charge, and he has to decide whether to ground all the air traffic in the United States. That's an amazing story. And the guy who actually made the decision is in the film. So it's a very interesting picture. And yeah. Okay. So we'll later see Al Qaeda for a long time. Well, it seemed like a long time, but for a number of years, Al Qaeda is referred to as AQI, Al Qaeda in Iraq. It's about 3 or 4 years this kind of lasts, as opposed to Al Qaeda in Yemen or various different sort of other places that Al Qaeda might be. So the suspicion was that this was a vast terrorist network and so on. It's like, it wasn't vast then, but after we went to war against it, it became vast. That's for sure. And Al Qaeda is variously translated as base or foundation, and it's also translated as hacker slang for database. And so there was sort of a lot of people made much of this at the time. There really wasn't anything to be understood about it particularly. It's just like, this is what these people chose to name themselves. Okay. And the United States demanded the extradition then of bin Laden and his fellow Al Qaeda leaders, and the Taliban leader, who we got to know the name of quite a great deal. Mullah is a religious leader. Mullah Muhammad Omar Mujahid, usually just shortened to Mullah Omar. And they said no. They were like, no, we're not doing that. So the United States then, by October 2001, so October 7th, 2001, had collected a pile of countries to support it because it had been attacked. And so remember that under the rules of jus ad bellum, it's a just war if you attack somebody who's attacked you. Well, who was it who had attacked the United States? Because it wasn't a country. It was a so-called non-state actor. So this was a really bad terrorist incident. But where was the country that attacked the United States? Because there was no flag flying, essentially. People didn't pull out a flag and say, for Afghanistan. That didn't happen. And so, the United States and Britain and Canada began to bomb Afghanistan. It took about a month or so for them to start. And by December, they basically owned the country. That's what they said. We said, because the bombing started. And you have to see some pictures of Afghanistan to understand how crazy that claim is. Apart from the fact of recent history, you just need to look and see. Yeah, okay, I know. There has not yet been a tornado. We're good. Okay, so you just have to look. It's like, okay, so if in 10 years and 15,000 deaths, the Soviet Union was not able to, quote-unquote, own Afghanistan, how likely was it that in 3 months of bombing, no matter how, unless it was nuclear bombing, how were you going to own a country like Afghanistan, which is some of the worst, toughest terrain in the world? It's desert, and it's not desert that you think of like dunes or something like that. It doesn't look like that. It's rocks, and it's rough mountains, and it's gravel and scree, and and the desert is not described as being golden or something like that. It's described as being gray. If you see pictures of it, I mean, there are beautiful places in Afghanistan, but that's not the pictures you look at. If you just sort of Google Afghanistan, say Google Afghanistan mountains, you're like, holy crap, look at these mountains, because they are rough, and there's no life there. There's no water. It's like, there. Well, I'm wrong. There's lots of life there, right? But it is very hardy life, and there is not a lot growing. That's for sure. But there's plenty of life. Yeah, snakes, scorpions, beetles, anything that can survive in these really grim conditions can survive there. But large stretches of the country are just empty because it's so tough. Well, the Taliban and Al Qaeda retreated rather than fight, which should sound familiar to us. It's like, where have we heard that before? It's like, oh yeah, Vietnam, right? And also 10 years of war of the Soviet Union fighting in Afghanistan. Didn't the RAND and all the other military think tanks in America pay attention to how the Soviet Union was being beaten in Afghanistan? Didn't they notice that, oops, there was a bit of a problem there, winning against the Afghan population? So their experience overall should have shown that thousands of years of seeing people come through this country and try to take it over, that you are not going to own the country in 3 months. Maybe people will back up and let you have it. You can borrow it for a few months. Like oppressed and poor people everywhere, the Taliban and Al-Qaeda knew not to stand and fight when the ground or terms were against them. And that is the rule of guerrilla fighting. They chose the when and where to fight. They chose the terms, they chose the ground, right? So although Pakistan has been considered a U.S. and NATO-aligned ally for decades, Pakistan actually gave safe harbor to both the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. So the war in Afghanistan was over, but the fighting actually hadn't really begun. This is this bizarre thing about both these particular wars.